My name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and welcome to my film journey, where each week I cover the things that I have been watching and picking up for the past week. I've been doing this for 48 weeks now, which is kind of insane to think about, because a lot of the things that I like to do is I like to start projects, but I don't like to finish them. And that's just, I think, a thing probably I gotta go to counseling about. But regardless, I am excited to talk about all the things that I have been picking up this week. I've actually picked up quite a bit, non-related to movies as well. I actually have a record to show you and a pamphlet, actually a booklet, a zine, if you will, and some other things to talk about, because I actually watched a lot of movies as well this week, and some in theaters, actually, the new 28 Years Later, which I'll talk about later. And, you know, it's been a crazy week, but at the same time, I feel really good, you know, and there's a lot of things going on in the world today that is really stressful, like incredibly stressful. So getting away from that as we're watching movies and escaping into media, even in like basketball, which Game 7's tonight, so it's a really big deal for me, especially because I'm a big Pacers fan. But for the people who are watching who are like, sports, I'm sorry. But now let's jump into the things that I've been picking up for the week. I would love to know in the comment section down below what you've been up to. You know, be sure to tell me down there, and I'll be sure to interact with you, even if it takes me a week to get back to you. I'm sorry about all that. So let's jump into the things that I picked up. All right, so the first thing that I picked up was something I had been listening to all week at work, and I had been listening to this just because it's good coworker music, and I'm not using that as a pejorative. Coworker music can be pretty bad, but this band is not bad. In fact, it's one of the best bands of all time. In fact, it took me a while to actually fall in love with them, which is kind of strange because, you know, I don't know why exactly, but I'm talking about Abba, and I'm talking about Gold. So this is a greatest hits compilation, and this is probably its best known iteration for most people, because, I mean, obviously Abba has their studio albums, but for the most people who are just casuals like me, you know, you want to get a greatest hits album, this is a pretty great greatest hits album. And I listened to it, like I said, a lot on Spotify and YouTube. So I finally got it on record. So I'm so excited to have it. And it just has a lot of classics in here, like Dancing Queen, Gimme, 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 Money, Money, Money. I'm just repeating things. Mamma Mia, I Have a Dream, Fernando, Voulez-Vous. There's just so many really fun tracks on here, and honestly, if I put this on, I probably will want to watch Mamma Mia and Mamma Mia Here We Go Again. So if I do that, you know, be sure to check that out in the coming weeks. I'm sure I will actually do that, since it is full summer swing mode. And now we're going to transition to a zine that I got in the mail, because I am subscribed to the A24 Club, the A24 kind of subscription that they do, where you can get some discounts on their website, a pin, and this zine that comes out each month for $10. I don't know how useful this is. I don't know how long I'll do this for, but it's fun so far. But the thing I got is issue 29 right here, so the A24 opening night. So this is actually kind of just a showcase of like opening nights for different celebrity walk-ons, right? So especially back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, where celebrities wore more casual clothing. So they would have like a Happy Gilmore shirt. You have John Lovitz with a crutch. There's just so many different types of I guess attire that they're wearing that is very atypical today, in today's standards, where I think everyone is kind of dressing up really well. But this is very casual streetwear, and this seems like just a really fun magazine. I really love the cutouts and like just kind of the style of where all the writing's kind of all over the place, and it just kind of seems like a fan magazine. So it does look really fun. Regardless, I'm going to read this and probably get a little bit of my TMZ in me, even though I'm pretty sure this is better than that smut. So yeah, I'm excited to read the opening night. All right, so now we're going to jump into the hauls that I picked up, and I have quite a bit of amazing treats for you, because several of these are just things that I've wanted on my list for the longest time, and I just finally decided to bite the bullet and do that. And let's actually talk first about two British shows that I'm really excited to have. In fact, I've seen some episodes of this first one, but I haven't seen the whole series. And the first one is Mighty Bouch. The Mighty Bouch right there is that kind of glare right there off the light. This is the first 3 series, which is the complete series. Just really, really excited to have this and just kind of go down this rabbit hole. There's the 3 seasons right there. This is just something that I'm really stoked about because I am a huge fan of both of these actors and all the things that they've been involved in. And like I said, I've seen a few episodes of this, and so it's really, really fun. Of course, things like Old Greg are a staple in my youth that I probably, a lot of the things in here probably aren't, you can't make them today, but regardless, I'm so happy to have it. Even if it's on DVD, it's exciting to have. Now, the next British show is probably one of the most iconic British shows of all time, and I'm sad to say I haven't seen any of it, which I finally have it now, but I'm talking about Fawlty Towers. I finally have it on DVD. We have John Cleese fresh off his Monty Python run. I think that is right where he kind of went and did his own thing, and this amazing British series came out from it. And I am so stoked to finally have this. In fact, both of these series, I'm gonna give some breathing room for myself just because I want to start series more and more, but I don't want to like just digest them all in one big sitting. So that's what I'm going to be doing with this kind of stuff. I'm going to be having a good breathing room as we get to both of these series, and we'll talk about them here probably in the coming months, but don't expect it anytime soon. All right, so the next film I have is a Region B release over from Studio Canal over in the UK, and this is an Agatha Christie adaptation from the early 80s, and that is Evil Under the Sun. In fact, I'm actually an hour into this movie right now. In fact, I decided to film this right now because it's kind of strapped on time, so I wanted to film this, and I'll probably be talking about this next week as I kind of watch the mystery unfold. But it's Agatha Christie. You got Hercule Poirot. I had to slow down to talk a little French. And this amazingly lit place. There's people like Maggie Smith's in here. There's also Peter Ustinov as Poirot, Jane Birkin, Diana Rigg, and among others. It's just a beautiful looking film, and I'm so excited to kind of dive further into this mystery. So we'll talk about that more here in a bit. All right, next is a Blu-ray that I didn't expect to ever pick up because I couldn't find it anywhere for the longest time, and that's because Oscilloscope actually has the release on this, and I was finally able to pick it up because it came available again, and I'm talking about The Vortilac, which is this French vampire film that I am really, really stoked to watch. And I remember my friend Daniel over at Cobwebs, I know he's blown up quite a bit, but I remember him talking about this on his channel, and he watched an early screening of it, and it got me very, very interested and piqued into this. And so I am really, really curious to check this period piece out and this vampire film. Happy to have it on Blu-ray finally, and has a couple of special features with short films from the director, two separate ones, and then a behind the scenes. So it's exciting. So you have the Blu-ray and you have 2 short films from this director. So has anyone seen The Vortilac? I would love to know your thoughts on it, or at least spoiler-free kind of stuff. All right, here's the big money. Probably you saw this on the thumbnail. I got this a little early, which is really exciting. I ordered it, and I didn't expect it to come in this early, but I finally got the second sight release of Nice Guys. And this isn't the last time we're going to be talking about Shane Black. We're going to talk about him in a second, but I love this film. This is probably one of my most anticipated releases of the year, just because of how much I love this movie and this kind of sharp black comedy that Shane Black likes to craft a lot, and I'm a huge fan of it. Things like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and the like, Lethal Weapon, of course, just these buddy cop movies. So actually it comes with some cards right here. It has the cast right there, Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling as our main cast. We just have people who are Margaret Qualley's right there, just people who are involved in the movie. There's actually quite a bit. It's a really fun cast. In fact, I actually really like these art cards. These are art cards I think done right, especially in the style of this movie, because it's definitely set stylized in the era that it came out in the 70s. And so this is actually probably the best part of it, is this hardcover book. Like, this is just incredible quality. Like, I don't know if you can see this, but like, my God, is this just a beautiful, beautiful book. And if you open it up, it actually has that aesthetic from like that red and yellow kind of tint. Man, I can smell it from here. It just looks so good, and I just cannot wait to read this alongside watching this movie again. again, I just picked it up, so I haven't seen this transfer just yet, but I love this movie, and it's one of the funniest movies out there, and what a great pairing. But here is the 4K and the Blu-ray itself, right? So you have the Region B Blu-ray, and then you have the all regions 4K. I'm just stoked about this. This is going to be so much fun, and I'm going to be talking about this very, very soon, probably next week. So peel your eyes out for this, and I'll talk more about this transfer and what it looks like and all the special features involved. All right, so the next film I got is one that I picked up locally here at my Entertain Mart, which is like a offshoot of Vintage Stock, and I just kind of bit the bullet on this. I didn't wait for any sales. I just was like, you know what? I feel like getting myself a treat, a Lucio Fulci treat, and that is Don't Torture a Duckling, which I still have not seen, so I don't know much about it, but I know this is one of the more iconic films from Fulci, and I have just been falling more and more in love with his work as I've gotten older. I used to be very, very averse to this very extreme type of horror, but now I'm like very, very open to it. So very excited about this release. This is the 4K from Arrow Video, and has quite a bit of stuff on it. Of course, there is the 4K. I don't know how much I can show you, but there is a booklet that comes with it right here. Also the 4K itself. And I'm just excited to watch more Fulci. In fact, I think I'm going to I have quite a bit of Fulci on my shelf. I've probably seen about 3/4 of it, but I think I might do kind of a Fulci run and probably just mess myself up a little bit by watching that and listening to the Italian band Fulci, which is a great one that adapts all of their types of films that this director made, actually. Really cool collaboration. If you like death metal, check out Fulci. Also, great director. Really excited to watch this one and mess myself up a little bit. All right, so now we're going to go to a random thing that I found, which I didn't actually know existed, which is kind of strange, but I found this in the wild, the same place, Entertain Mart, and I got this for a pretty good deal because I think this is out of print now, and this is from one of my favorite series of all time. I grew up with this show. It's considered probably in my top 5 shows of all time. It means a lot to me. And I'm talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I'm talking about season 8, the motion comic, right? And so this is the follow-up to the Hellmouth opening in season 7 and this very apocalyptic ending to the show. This show is just perfect, and honestly, it's making me want to rewatch the whole thing just to watch this season 8, and probably will do that. Actually, this is my guarantee. I'm probably going to be watching Buffy. It's been a long time, and it's right for it, and I'm excited for this. Don't know much about this. This is the extension of like the comics. The comic series actually, along with Angel, extended the universe of the Buffy and Angel, and this entire kind of creation of the Slayer mythology. And so I'm just really, really excited to check this out and finally have it, I guess. And so kind of seeing where they go next. All right, so next we're going to go to a film that I really, really enjoyed watching in theaters. In fact, I'm surprised I didn't actually pick it up anytime sooner. I just waited for it to be $10, and I did pick it up for $10. And I'm talking about Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. I love these series. These are really dumb films, but they are just bombastic. They are visually stunning. They are so much fun. This actually has character development, which is unlike a lot of the other Godzilla films. I feel like this one might be my favorite. This one in the original 2014 Godzilla is probably my favorite, but I just love this team up. This is a movie that I'm excited to rewatch and kind of just put it on as a popcorn flick and just kind of see all these really great visuals as they team up. This is really, really fun movie. I'm excited to watch this again here in the summer. All right, so the last 2 films I picked up this week are actually ones that I watched as well, so this will be a good transition to the films that I watched this week, and I watched quite a bit, and also a TV series, which we'll talk about here in a second. But the first one I want to talk about is a film from Sofia Coppola, who I'm a huge fan of, and that is Priscilla. And this is the real-life story of Priscilla Presley as she meets Elvis at a very young age, which is a little troubling, and it kind of shows her side of the story, right? Her side of the story of being a stay-at-home kind of wife, or somebody who's fallen in love with this icon of a rock star who has become, a lot larger than life. But you see the small little intimate details in here with this kind of story, and it reminds me a lot of something like Spencer in the way that it's shot. It's shot really, really well, and has this tender, kind of side to it that I think is really kind of reminiscent of what Sofia Coppola has done in the past. And this is just a really delightful and also heartbreaking kind of story. It's one that I definitely recommend people check out. This is kind of the polar opposite of Elvis, the Baz Luhrmann film that came out around the same exact time period, but it's kind of showing Priscilla's perspective. In fact, she was still alive as she was making this movie, Priscilla Presley, and she actually helped with Sofia Coppola a little bit on kind of getting her perspective of the whole thing, which I thought was kind of splendid. In fact, there's a really great special feature in here kind of showing behind the scenes looks at that and kind of just talking with her, and it's really illuminating, I think, in that sense. There's also another behind the scenes thing here with filmmaker Liv McNeil, who is I guess an older teenager / early 20s maybe, and it's really interesting kind of seeing her behind the scenes kind of mini documentary about making this movie, because Priscilla was really young as a lot of these events unfolded, and she's kind of mirroring herself in here a little bit around like what does this mean about like this time of my life, and late teens, early 20s. It's a really interesting concept, and I think it's a really fascinating kind of behind the scenes feature. So that alone made it very interesting. But besides that, the score in this is really spectacular. It's probably my favorite score in probably a bunch of these types of films. It's really haunting, but also really tender. And I think people need to check this movie out. It's a 4 out of 5 for me. It's a movie that I probably will revisit someday in the future, but it's a strong one, and I definitely recommend people check it out. Next is a film from Mike Flanagan, who I'm a huge horror fan of, and also the thing that he's about to put out. I think The Life of Chuck already came out, but I haven't seen it just yet. But here is one of his earlier works on Blu-ray, which all of his stuff should be on Blu-ray, gosh dang it. And I'm talking about Ouija, Origin of Evil, which is a sequel to the Ouija franchise, which honestly, just watch this movie. It has no real connection to the other movie besides a Ouija board, right? But this movie is really fun. It is a movie about two young girls with their mom, who she's kind of a huckster, who kind of uses the Ouija board as to kind of trick people, but also get paid, but also get them assurance about the people and the spirits on the other side. And she's kind of this very elaborate thing in her house where she is contacting spirits and pretty much helping people move through their trauma. But it backfires eventually on her and her daughters, and her youngest daughter gets possessed, and you kind of see the scariness of that concept unfold in this movie. I really love the scares in this. It's not cheap in any way. It's actually really well executed, and for a budget that probably doesn't have much, they're all shot in this one house. It's really well done. It's a pretty scary horror film, and I actually really enjoyed the cast. And you, just like with Mike Flanagan's work, you really get to know the characters, and he's just really good at character work and character development, and you kind of just fall in love with the people who he is involved with. And in fact, the behind the scenes stuff on here, actually I watched that, kind of showcases how much they really enjoyed each other's company. They made each other laugh all the time, and they just had a really fun time making this movie, which is kind of crazy. Like this really scary movie, but everyone just smiles all behind the camera. So that alone should tell you it's a good movie. So I give this a 4 out of 5. It's that much fun. It's definitely a B movie. It's definitely not one of the better Mike Flanagan works, but it's definitely worth checking out if you've not seen this movie, because it's just a really fun horror film and has some genuinely frightening moments. All right, so now let's transition to some zombie films. And yes, I'm going to use the term zombie because that's what these movies are. Even if Danny Boyle doesn't think they are, they're definitely in that wheelhouse. So don't get offended by that. But of course, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about 28 Days Later and this whole franchise, which we'll talk about here. But let's first talk about the iconic first movie in the early 2000s. Cillian Murphy wakes up 28 days later after an outbreak of an infection, a viral infection called Rage. And this gets, pretty much the whole population in England pretty much wiped out, or at least where he wakes up in London, very eerie and deserted London that he thinks is here. And eventually he runs into infected and people who try to help him, and as he just goes along tries to survive this entire situation, I suppose. This is just one of those iconic British horror films. It's shot kind of guerrilla style. It's very chaotic and frenetic, and a lot of the things that it does, and I really love the style of Danny Boyle and Alex Garland's writing, as they are superpower duo team, in my opinion, because, I mean, the things that they put out after the fact are stellar, even Alex Garland's own work, his own work. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. This movie is just, it's a really, really great kind of almost B horror film that turned into this iconic cult film. And eventually it would get to where we're at now. But this movie I would probably give a 4 out of 5. It's a iconic film for a reason. It's not necessarily a perfect film, but it's definitely got all the makings of something that eventually will probably become a classic one day. So yeah, definitely check out 28 Days Later. I believe this is actually out of print, but I hope that something like Second Sight puts out like a trilogy box set or something along those lines. There's going to be more than 3. I probably should say that. But regardless, 28 Days Later, if you can find a way to watch this, I think it's streaming. Definitely check this movie out because it is a great one. All right, so let's now transition to the film that was not made by Danny Boyle or Alex Garland, and that is 28 Weeks Later, which I actually do not physically have. I think I watched it on Hulu just to prep myself for 28 Years Later. And this movie is actually inconsequential to that, I guess, story, the 28 Weeks Later, or 28 Days Later. Man, I'm going to get confused a lot. But this movie is pretty fun, nonetheless. It's not great, but it's fun. And it kind of starts off with the outbreak that happened in England, and we are in a really small countryside townhome where a bunch of families are kind of walled up and just kind of staying quiet, getting away from all the madness of this rage virus, and they get attacked, and everyone leaves except for, or everyone pretty much gets taken over except for this one guy who leaves his wife behind thinking she is dead. And it fast forwards as he's in a safe zone now. He reunites with his kids who were outside of the country at the time, and he tells them of what happened, but he lies to them. And eventually his wife comes back, who is partially infected, but she's, not displaying what this looks like. And after a kiss, he becomes infected and runs amok this entire thing. No quarantine zone anymore. Eventually it gets to the point where this whole operation is just like broken down, and it reinfects everybody. And it's crazy, and I love the viciousness of this sequel, because there's definitely some vicious things going on in the movie, and stuff that I'm like, whoa, like it kind of ups it to 11, but at the same time, it is definitely the weakest of the batch, and it's definitely, where the characters you kind of fall in love with in 28 Days Later, you don't really fall in love with anyone in this movie. You were maybe the kids a little bit you're supposed to enjoy, but they're honestly not. They're not that important in my opinion. I don't know how to describe it, but this movie is a solid movie. It's a 3 out of 5 for me. You can watch it to watch 28 Years Later, but you don't really have to, because as we're transitioning into 28 Years Later, which is another movie which I don't have because it just came out in theaters. I just watched this movie, and I actually have a lot to say about it. I really enjoyed it. A lot of people are kind of mixed about it, and it is kind of a continuation of this outbreak of this rage. So, talking about 28 Weeks Later a little bit, in the very beginning of this movie, it kind of does a little bit of a retcon where at the very end of the film, it shows the infected in Paris. And so it's like, okay, now it's on mainland Europe. It's going to expand into the world, right? Well, actually, in 28 Years Later, they decided, they stopped it from being infected at the beginning in Europe. They pushed it back to the British Isles, and that's where it is. It's a quarantine zone. That's where it all is. And honestly, Danny Boyle, I've seen some interviews him talking about that decision. He's like, I just really want to focus on this one isolated area, and I think that's actually quite brilliant, because it's something that you can contain, right? A story that you can contain to a specific area, and also just get kind of the highlights of that area. But regardless, now we're going to 28 Years Later, which is following a father and a son who live off the slight off coast, off the mainland, as they are in this village that are just, they're surviving because of the high tide and the low tide. And the high tide and low tide have this pathway that goes to the mainland, and they've adopted some traditions where they will go over there just to get some food, some lumber for the things that they need, and a lot of just the material that they need to live, right? But of course, they're very cautious about it, and sometimes the infected are all about in that area, which is what this movie starts off with. And I'm not going to get into spoilers because I definitely want people to watch this movie. So Danny Boyle uses the frenetic kind of style again with like iPhones, but also just different cameras. He uses a lot of different camera works, and I think the splicing of it is really interesting because it's very like unsettling. And I think that's what makes this movie really, really strong, is the fact that it just, on every beat, something crazy is going to happen. And you see a lot of different things, and there's some expanded universe stuff that starts creeping into this story that things get a little weird, but at the same time it's this really kind of brilliant coming of age story as well, between a father and his son, a son and his mother. And it's just, I don't know, like, it's something that it's been sitting with me for a few days now, and I really, really love it. And it ends on a note where there definitely is going to be a sequel. In fact, I think it's the plan of a trilogy, and this movie is going to extend into that. So when I give you my rating, it's definitely, it's not the full picture. So we're not going to be seeing the full picture here, but I've been thinking about this for a bit, and I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. It's one that it excited me the entire time I was watching it. It made a lot of really crazy leaps and bounds, and I love the frenetic energy to it. I'm going to use that word a lot. I love just the chaos of this movie. I also just love how tender this movie is, because there's moments in here that are really, really tender. And I think it's kind of a brilliant way to make this. And I hope Danny Boyle and Alice Garland and company are going to continue down that path. And so it's going to be exciting to watch this trilogy unfold, but definitely go check it out. And it's definitely a movie I think people are going to have their thoughts and opinions about, but for me, it was a brilliant one, and I loved it, and I loved how chaotic it was, and it really surprised me. All right, so we're going to continue down the horror path, but this is an action horror film. It's one of my favorite horror films of all time. I told you I was not done talking about Shane Black. I'm talking about one of my favorite films of all time. An easy 5 out of 5. I already gave you, the rating, but it's Predator. This is one of my favorite films of all time. Of course, just watching Killer of Killers on Hulu, the animated film, got me into the mood to watch this movie again. In fact, I watched this on Father's Day with my dog Bowie, and I said, you know what? We need to watch this together, because this is what a father and son would do, right? And I also almost one day picked up a $800 life-sized Predator statue when I was up in St. Louis. Ran into this flea market that had this $800 Predator statue, and I'm like, I kind of want this, but I know if I did buy this, I would be financially in a lot of debt, and also I would never talk to a woman again. Now let's talk about Predator. My favorite action turns horror movie of all time. I love the machismo. I love the kind of just the sweat and the aggressiveness of this cast and crew, like the grit that they are, these tough guys that are, you don't mess with them. The Carl Weathers, Schwarzenegger, Ventura, even Shane Black himself, who is involved in this as an actor. And it's just really fun. It's interesting because they're also secretly being hunted by a Yautja, a predator, right, if you will. We didn't have a name at the time, but this alien life form that came to Earth to fight the greatest prey, and also just wants to prove itself. And man, oh man, do these machismo men get knocked down one by one as something is not right, as they're trying to escape our predator. And I love this movie, and it turns into this horror film where all of these men who are these tough guys, they're helpless, and it's wonderful in that manner. But there's iconic moments in here. There's lines that I love. There's also just this action involved with it, and just great practical effects. It almost looked really goofy. I know Jean-Claude Van Damme was originally attached to this as the Predator, and it looked really, really stupid. But I'm glad that they stuck with this, and my God, is this a classic. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm glad I showed my dog Bowie the movie, because he really enjoyed it too. All right, switching away from Predator to the kitchen, to a film that I really enjoy with Stephen Graham that came out a few years ago. This is from Second Sight. I have the Blu-ray here right here. This is a Region B release. If you don't have a Region B player, you can't get this one, but regardless, it's a good movie. And I'm talking about Boiling Point. And Stephen Graham is our main chef, and this movie is shot in like one take, and is really well done in that manner, because it's showing pretty much a night in the kitchen, right? Of this kind of upper end, maybe middle of the road upper end, because it's definitely not like the echelon of chef restaurants, but it's definitely like a high-end restaurant where they take themselves really seriously, and they also want to make sure that they're kind of casual at the same time. But regardless, this one shot, seeing the kitchen crew and like everyone involved as they're pretty much neck to neck and like fighting. If anyone's ever like been in a restaurant business or like has been in a kitchen, I have, in multiple jobs in my early late teens, early 20s. I know the tension here between people as we're just trying to get this task done, and there's a lot of tension in here, and it's just a brilliant looking movie. It looks more sinister than it is on this, but regardless, Boiling Point is just this really well done. This actually might be one of Stephen Graham's best performances. I just really love him. But there is the cast and crew right there as they are kind of going through the kitchen, right, and just trying to make these plates for these individuals. And there's actually quite a bit of a good story here too, because his former partner shows up, and who used to have a restaurant with him, and it kind of causes a lot of the tension. And so it's actually just one of those really fast-paced movies that also can give you a little bit of anxiety. If you're a fan of the show The Bear, you would love this movie. So Boiling Point is a 4 out of 5 for me. It's a movie that I definitely recommend people check out. It's a good time, and Second Sight, you did a great job on this one. All right, so the next film I have here is probably the most alarming film on my list. In fact, I don't know how I got the inkling to watch this, but I decided to watch it, I think, on Father's Day, along with Predator. I watched this movie first, and then I watched Predator to kind of get this out of my system. But this movie is a tragic one, and it's kind of just surreal in the most realistic sense. I'm talking about The Act of Killing. This is probably one of the greatest documentaries of all time, talking about the late 60s, from 1965, where Indonesia, and with the help of the U.S. government and other entities, pretty much wiped out all the communists in Indonesia, all of the educators and anyone who stood in their way, and murdered millions. It was a genocide, and it was a really terrifying event. Now, the thing that is the scariest thing about this is the perpetrators are still they're still around. In fact, they're glorified in the places they're at. And this is actually a story of those perpetrators, and they want to reenact what they did. And they do this with the help of a filmmaker who is just curious about their story, and like, how are they still in power? Like, what's the perspective of them? And also just like, what does this look like? And it wakes some of them up because of how shocking the shit that they did to other people comes back to bite them. Some of them unfazed. They're so lost in the things that they've done that they can't be helped. And it's really scary watching that unfold. Now, there are other people involved with this who kind of second guess themselves and realize what they have done. And it is a horrifying film for that reason. But I think this is a necessary watch. This is a movie I think everyone should check out. No matter how difficult this subject material is, it is one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. It's a horrifying one because it's real. It's reality. In fact, there's some special features on here that has, I believe, like a television program with the director kind of jumping into and talking about his perspective and being here and involved with a bunch of these killers. And it's just a shocking movie. This movie is a 5 out of 5. It's hard to put a number to it, but it's a must watch in my opinion. It's something that you should check out. It's something like Showa. It's a very important documentary, and I definitely recommend people check it out. It's definitely something that you're going to have to stomach up to watch, but it's worth watching, and it's good to have this perspective, in my opinion. All right, so transitioning away from a really hard to watch documentary to some really slow-paced, kind of transcendental media that I have. I actually watched 3 films here that are very different from each other, but also kind of showcase slow cinema in a way that is really transformative and also just really kind of brightened my perspective on the world. And the thing is, the first one I'll talk about is one from Second Run. When I was over in the UK, there was actually a sale, I believe, on some Second Run discs. In fact, I got 2, and I'll talk about them both here. But this one is from 1978, a once thought lost film from India. That is The Circus Tent, or Thomp, I think is how you say it. But I'm not going to say that director's name. I'm probably going to butcher that. If anyone's familiar with Satyajit Ray in his works, that kind of transcendental, neo-realistic type of cinema that India was known for before Bollywood, if you will, it is along those lines, and is about a traveling circus who puts up this tent in this village that really isn't known for having much entertainment, and you can just see the joy and the happiness that it brings to the villagers, because they're like, hey, you're giving us attention, you're giving us entertainment, and it goes back and forth between these different performances that are really, really stunning and really fun to watch, and then also just the subtle life of the villagers and how they interact with the performers outside of the tent itself. And there's a lot of different subtle things going on. Really great camera work and just the really great shots. And it's a film that's really, really fascinating, and one that I think is a time capsule for the types of movies that would come out during this time period, and also just like a lost time period, in my opinion. But this is a brilliant movie. And like I said, it's a slow one, so if you're not comfortable with that, I definitely wouldn't recommend it for those types of people to watch it. But I'd give this movie a 4 out of 5, personally. I really enjoyed this movie, and I think it's a time capsule of a film, and I think I'm really, really glad that they found it and restored this movie and showcased it to the world, because it's one of the best transcendental type of stories. All right, so the other second run film that I got is from Pierre Portabella. This is actually a full-length feature and a short film that he created, and I'm talking about The Silence Before Bach and Mudanza. And I really enjoyed the film. The short is good, but we'll talk about the film itself. But The Silence Before Bach, very much like the title suggests, talks about Johann Sebastian Bach and kind of the transformative power that his music has on the different populations and different, different, I guess, people who are in very different vocations, going from kind of blue collar all the way up to high class, high society type of musicians. And it showcases Bach's music through these different performances from different instruments, and there's also just some experimental work. It's kind of set up like an experimental documentary, if you will, with some really great art pieces. And I also just think this movie has a fluidity to it that reminds me of something like listening to just music, right? And so it has a very musical quality to it. I know that's probably very obvious with the subject material, but just the way that it's like meandering along, it does showcase that. And there's some really, really subtle and beautiful moments in this film, and I definitely recommend people check it out, because it's something that, if you are a fan of music, you're going to find something really illuminating in this piece of work. So I'd give it a 4 out of 5. Mudanza is an interesting short film. I definitely wouldn't recommend checking it out. It's definitely more on the experimental side. It's got some interesting quirks to it, but it's not something that resonated with me as much. So I'm probably not going to, rate that myself. But I definitely loved The Silence Before Bach, and am interested in other works from this director, because I've heard some interesting things. So yeah, check out The Silence Before Bach, if you will, and have yourself a good time with some good music. All right, so the next film I have is another one that I picked up in the UK last time I was there, and this is from the BFI. This is a 4K restoration of Claire Denis' first feature film, I cannot talk, and that is Shakalot right here, which is an amazing film, another meditative piece of work, almost autobiographical, of Claire Denis as she traveled as she was really young in a lot of African countries. This one particularly in Cameroon, and showcasing kind of the class structure and hitting it head on, right? So this came out, I think, in the late 80s, so 88 is when this came out, and it's in English, French, and German. So because Cameroon was, had a lot of colonization in this area, especially by the English, the French, and the Germans, and so it's gonna have a mixed bag of that, and you see that in the almost, how like in Downton Abbey, there is this upstairs downstairs dynamic where you have servants and the people who are in power, and you see that dynamic unfold a lot in this story, and it's really subtle in this sense, but it's also really revelatory and illuminating, especially coming from a child's perspective who knows that something's wrong and something's off about this, and it showcases that in a brilliant way. There's a lot of little bits of longing in this movie, and also just some amazing camera work, and also just an amazing score as well. I love the score in this. It's so odd to have a score like this in a movie like this, and you'll know what I'm talking about when you watch it. But this movie, I could easily see this growing on me, but right now it's a 4 out of 5. I definitely recommend people check out Shakalot. So I definitely recommend people check out this movie. It's a wonderful one, and I definitely think people will enjoy this. And Claire Denis continues to make really brilliant films. All right, so moving on from Shakalot to another film that is just brilliantly shot, to a film that I've watched multiple times, and we're going to jump into this before we jump into a TV series, and that will be the last thing I'll talk about. But this movie is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one that I think it just enchants me every single time I watch it. It's a mystery from 1975. I'm talking about Picnic at Hanging Rock, and this is the brilliant release from Second Sight. In fact, there it is right there. I actually have the books outside of it. I told you I was going to talk about some books. I'm actually in the middle of them right now. But I love these art cards. This is one of the most gorgeous films I've ever seen. It's up there with Barry Lyndon for me, which both came out in 1975, which is kind of crazy. But I just love the art pieces of this particular story, this mystery of a story actually written by Joan Lindsay, which I'll talk about here in a second. But like, my God, like, this art is just so stunning right there, of these schoolgirls who are in this private college, actually just taking a day trip to Hanging Rock, which is in the Australian outback, and it's got this really mysterious aura to it, if you will. And so this actually comes with 4 discs, in fact. I love how beautiful this shot is. Like, there's Hanging Rock itself. Like, that just looks gorgeous right there, right? But anyway, there are the 4 discs. There's 2 4Ks and 2 Blu-rays. It has the theatrical cut and the director's cut. I watched the director's cut on 4K. I also watched all the special features, where they actually have archival footage of Joan Lindsay, who actually wrote the novel itself right here. This is the novel that comes with it, which I'm actually going to start reading right here. In fact, I really love the start of this, and this is actually something that I was reading into, and I'll just read this excerpt because it's just really fascinating, and I think this is a chilling way to start a story. Whether Picnic at Hanging Rock is fact or fiction, my readers must decide for themselves, as the fateful picnic took place in the year 1900, and all the characters who appear in this book are long since dead. It hardly seems important. That is a really good line to start a book. So I'm really enthralled in this story. And like I said, I've watched this movie like probably 4 or 5 times. I love it that much. But anyway, this is a stunning restoration from Second Sight. This is a gorgeous looking movie. It's a enchanting mystery of these 4 girls that disappear up in Hanging Rock, and seeing everyone unfold after the fact, and seeing like them questioning what's going on. And there's definitely something subtle and underneath a lot of it, and I think the error of the mystery is what's so enchanting about it. I think there are some power dynamics involved with this movie that are unspoken, especially with Joan Lindsay, who actually in the archival footage talks a little bit about why everyone always asks her about like what this story meant, and she's like, there's some truth, there's some fact or fiction, if you will, to this story, but it's going to be a mystery, and it honestly probably is too tough for her to talk about, which I think is it makes it unique and special. As scary as that sounds, but regardless, it also comes with another book, which is pretty much very much like The Nice Guys, kind of this really high quality book, kind of showcasing all of just these different pictures, and then also just the people who were involved with this, and then also just scholars talking about this movie. Peter Weir, this is probably my favorite Peter Weir film, which is kind of crazy because I love Master and Commander. I love Dead Poets Society, Truman Show. There's a lot. Walkabout. That's Nicholas Roeg. Why did I say Walkabout was him? But regardless, this is like iconic Australian cinema. This is like one of the best films of 1975, which is one of the greatest film years ever. And this edition is the edition to get. There is a Criterion edition, which I have as well, and I really love that edition, but this movie is special to me, and seeing it on 4K just blew me away. This is one of the best looking films ever. It's a clear 5 out of 5 for me. I adore this movie, and I think if you like mysteries and that are unsolved and something that you can kind of get lost in a world, this is one of those movies. So yeah, check out Picnic and Hanging Rocket. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is a show that I just decided to start watching, and my God, am I just putting my a smile ear to ear. Talking about all the slow cinema I've been watching lately, and then watching this is kind of comforting because it's a nice balance in my opinion. And I'm talking about the show Ted Lasso. Now, I am only one season in, and I'm in love with these characters. I'm in love with Ted Lasso as a coach. His very arrogant, but also understandably distraught boss. We also have field techs with him, Nathan or Nate, and this team that definitely does not get together or get along with each other, and it's really, really comforting to see that dynamic between all these people. It's definitely more about the characters, less about soccer, even though soccer is really important in this story as well. And man, I'm really having a good time with this, and I cannot wait to watch season 2. I've heard season 2 really ups the ante. It makes it a little bit more dramatic. These actions that the characters done in the first season really, really matter. So I'm so stoked to jump into season 2 now and kind of cover that more as I do that. So this is the show I'm currently on right now, and my God, am I having a blast with it. And man, I'm just again, smiling ear to ear. So regardless, that is all I watched for the week and all the things that I picked up. I watched a lot. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let's go Pacers. Pacers win in 7. Let me know what you've been watching down in the comment section down below. I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.